The Dark Knight Returns was a revelation from the moment it debuted in 1986. Frank Miller's filthy, nihilistic vision of Gotham City provided the backdrop for a stirring story of an older Batman coming out of retirement to help save his city.
The first one was very much a reintroduction of Batman as if he were a brand new character, trying to throw away the dust and muck that had gathered on him over all the ages and trying to make him a bit more rough and tumble, a bit saucier. He wasn't kid stuff anymore.
Older and angrier, this was a Batman no one up to that point had ever seen, and it was a monster hit. Over the past 34 years, The Dark Knight Returns has been a license to print money for DC Comics, spawning sequels, prequels, and spin-offs. It was the basis for Zack Snyder's blockbuster film, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Elements of the story can be found in Todd Phillips' Joker, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, and even on television in the CW's Arrowverse. It fundamentally changed its title character and the American comic book industry. It helped usher in an age of mature, nuanced comic storytelling. It also inspired an entire generation of creators.
That book really opened my eyes to the potential of this medium and made me want to chuck my 4 years of studying psychology and get into the world of comics.
Yeah, the best Batman's already been written. Frank Miller wrote the best Batman. So that's why it sucks to write Batman. You're Sisyphus, you're pushing that rock up the hill. And he did it up. Do you know how old Frank Miller was when he wrote DKR? He was 29. He was 29 years old.
This is the story of how a non-canon 4-issue limited series became the most influential comic book of all time. This is the legacy of The Dark Knight Returns. In the mid-1980s, Frank Miller was already a superstar thanks to his run on Marvel's Daredevil, the Wolverine miniseries with Chris Claremont, and his creator-owned title, Ronin. He had begun working on a story of an aging Batman who had hung up the cowl. Miller was living in New York City when the Big Apple had fallen on hard times.
I was living in a very, very rough New York City. Son of Sam, New York. It's the one that Scorsese captured so well in Taxi Driver and like that. And so I was living in a very, very rough New York, and I wanted to capture that in Batman.
The overcrowding, the crime, and the anger Miller found in New York informed his version of Gotham City. Klaus Janson, Miller's inker on Daredevil, heard his pal was working on a big Batman story from then DC editor Dick Giordano.
So I'd heard rumors that there was something brewing, but I very much remember Dick Giordano coming up to me in the hallway. Frank is working on a Batman project, and he wants you to ink it. And I thought about it for, I think, 3 seconds, and I said, okay. That, was just as simple as that. The opportunity to work with Frank at any point on anything is something that I would say yes to.
The story Miller crafted was set in a dystopian Gotham which had lost its greatest hero. Batman hadn't been seen in a decade. Bruce Wayne was around, but he was a dead man walking without his crusade to give him purpose. When he returns to action, he's a 55-year-old over-the-hill crime fighter. The introduction of Carrie Kelly was perhaps the most important plot point. It gave Bruce a goal to strive for, to train the next generation that would protect Gotham.
There was a growing sense of excitement over the pages as they were coming in. Frank was showing his pencils around. When I handed in pages, I would go up to the office and hand them in personally.
The series is loaded with breathtaking imagery and memorable sequences. The splash page in the first issue, where the Dark Knight makes his return. In Book 2, when Bruce, recovered from his injuries, is embraced by Robin. Perhaps the most paternal image of Batman ever to see print.
When Batman tells Carrie Kelly, sit up straight. Great ending line, summarized their relationship perfectly.
Him driving around in that big wheeled bat car, that was pretty wild.
It's the "this would be a good death" line. It's on that first page when he's driving the car. It's on him at the very end, and it's the last line of the book. This is a good life.
In the fourth and final chapter, we see Batman literally riding in to save the day with his army of young soldiers.
When you're introduced to the Joker and you see him look up at the screen, and then it's almost like the rebirth of Batman has signaled the rebirth of the Joker, and Frank just does it very subtly. That really meant a lot to me because comics before that were really about what you saw was what you understood.
Miller put the character's inner turmoil on display, often using just a single image within a 16-panel grid. His layouts practically compelled you to reread the story to pick up on little moments you may have missed the first time.
Frank was laying a whole layer of subtlety on top of that, saying, no, there's a whole inner psychology that's happening. I'm not going to necessarily say it or show it to you. You are going to read the words and look at the picture and then feel what he's feeling. And that was just a very different approach and very sophisticated and very powerful.
Perhaps the most iconic sequence in the entire saga is the fight between the two DC Titans, Batman versus Superman. It's a battle that almost didn't happen, according to Miller.
When I first put together The Dark Knight Returns, my initial version of it didn't even have Superman. It was just Batman, up against criminals and cops. And then I realized inevitably it was heading toward a conflict with Superman.
Because of the beatdown the Man of Steel received at Batman's hands, Miller has spent years defending himself against claims he hates Superman.
I always wanted Batman to beat the crap out of Superman, and he did. Then he did it again. And finally, in the third one, Batman does come to realize that Superman has been a real gentleman about the whole thing all this time, because he sees Superman lose his temper, and he sees the attempts could be world-shattering.
The climactic moment in The Dark Knight Returns became the centerpiece of 2016's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Director Zack Snyder also lifted specific panels of imagery directly from the comics as inspiration. Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy also pulled from the pages of The Dark Knight Returns: the Tumbler in Batman Begins, the copycat Batman vigilantes in The Dark Knight, and of course, Bruce Wayne returning to be Batman after hiding out for a decade. Nolan even referenced that famous line a cop says on page 25 of Book 1, "We're in for a show, kid."
Boy, you are in for a show tonight, son.
On television, the series Gotham referenced the final battle between Batman and the Joker in an episode of the third season. Batwoman installment of the CW's Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover featured Kevin Conroy as an aging Caped Crusader, much like the one we met in Miller's story. And in animation, the new Batman Adventures episode adapted Batman's fight with the mutant leader. This is all to say, Miller's story has cast an impossibly wide shadow over pop culture. The true legacy of Miller's masterwork is how it sparked a sea change in American comics. Together with Watchmen and Mouse, it challenged creators and publishers to be more ambitious. It helped push the boundaries of the comics medium. Without DKR, it's not unreasonable to think we wouldn't have seen the rise of Vertigo and other creator-owned imprints. Miller's story helped usher in the era of the comics auteur.
You know, if you read it now, it doesn't feel as different because it's had such an immense impact upon so many generations of writers and artists. Frank was really pushing the edges of the act of storytelling, you know, having pages with 16 panels and then these glorious splash pages. Just a very different kind of way of telling the story that we are all used to reading.
The impact of the story even extended to production value. It was printed on higher quality paper, which served to enhance the vivid artwork created by Miller, Janson, and colorist Lynn Varley, and the letters by the underrated John Costanza. But some think the series actually hurt comics as much as it helped. Miller's dark tale pushed comics further away from younger readers, a problem that persists today.
Dark Knight gets the credit and the blame. And I'll share with you that one day Dick Giordano, many years after Dark Knight Returns, said to me he regretted that. I think Dick was a little bit more interested in a positive, sunny kind of an outlook in his life.
Alan Moore, however, said that The Dark Knight was inevitable. In a 1986 essay, the Frank Miller Complete Batman hardcover, the legendary writer wrote, "Heroes are starting to become a problem. They aren't what they used to be. Or rather they are, and therein lies the heart of the difficulty. We demand new heroes," Moore declared. Comics had to keep up with the growing sophistication of its readers. Frank Miller did that by introducing a Batman that changed the paradigm. While the campy shtick of the 1960s TV series had been wiped clean years earlier by creators such as Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, Steve Englehart, and Marshall Rogers, Miller's opus took The Dark Knight into uncharted territory. Without Dark Knight Returns, we don't get Year One, also from Miller, The Long Halloween, The Killing Joke, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, or Batman Hush. And we certainly wouldn't have had A Death in the Family. Don't take our word for it. Let the writer of that story, Jim Starlin, explain.
The Dark Knight story has a display case with a Robin costume in it, and there's some reference to the Joker. So I said, well, it's got to be the Joker. And it only made sense. Who else would be, it's not the same. If the Penguin beat him to death with an umbrella, it wouldn't be the same as the crazy Joker with a crowbar.
In the decades since its debut, The Dark Knight Returns has been put under scrutiny via modern-day sensibilities. Some critics say its fascist overtones and embrace of vigilante justice have not aged well. Others say all the dark dystopian future stories it inspired and less successful sequels like The Dark Knight Strikes Again have weakened the impact of the original. That could all be true, but taken on its own, The Dark Knight Returns remains a watershed moment in comics.